Hello again, I'm Richard Ashworth. I'm here to talk to you about the next of the Tidal hexagrams. These are the hexagrams, 6-line figures, in the Book of Changes that mark the transition of the energy from the light to the dark and back again. And we are here at the beginning of January, where the light is returning and is beginning to become less fragile. Now, you may be interested in the hexagram simply to learn more about Chinese thought, but it may be that you've cast this hexagram, in which case what I'm going to say will work on all sorts of different levels. What I say may work internationally, globally, politically, socially, personally, to do with relationship, to do with commerce, whatever. So I will try to accommodate the many different ways that people come across hexagrams and make use of them. And this is hexagram number 19, Lin, advancing or approaching. All of the hexagrams have this aspect of ing. They are present participles. They are things happening now, about to happen, but it is a dynamic thing that is moving all the time. It is the Book of Changes. So, and this one consists of earth over lake, that's to say kun over dway. So we have the mother, the receptive, yin earth, the fertile over the lake, which is the daughter, the mischievous, you might say, the joyous, the eldest, the youngest daughter. But it's very much about a nurturing, a beginning, a safe start. We now have a hexagram which consists, as you can see here, of 2 yang lines underneath and then 4 yin. So we have this rock bed to fall back onto, the process of development, growing, our journey towards wholeness, and the journey of the energy towards the light, the maximum light at the summer solstice, is a much more secure one than it has been the previous couple of hexagrams. The previous one, Fu, the return, for instance, has just the one precarious yang line at the bottom. You know, can we get there? Can we hang on? Will things work out? So the judgment, these are the words that King Wen wrote in around 1050 BC. To begin a sacrificial offering, profit the divination. Well, actually what he wrote was Yuan Heng Li Chen, which is an invocation perhaps to the 4 corners of the world, to the 4 winds, to the light, to the dark, to the water, to the fire, to the sky, to the earth, that kind of thing. But it harks back to very, very early times. It has this kind of a deep sacrificial wicker man kind of a meaning. Second line is reaching into the 8th month, there will be misfortune. So there's something about the success not lasting. Obviously in terms of the light it goes away again, and then it returns again. But 8 months down the line there is much discussion about that. We'll return to that to some extent. The ideograph, the picture, and if you look here, this is Wu Jing Yuan's Yijing, Book of Changes, a very hard book to get hold of. Email me if you want more information or an ISBN. You can see just about, there it is, there's the there, can you see my finger now? There we go. That's the picture. You really can't make it out. But what it consists of is an official bowing to the emperor in the top left, someone standing in the top right, perhaps the emperor, and below that 3 mouths. So it's a group being led, perhaps a group being led towards, you know, prosperity and food and so on and so forth. These things, they didn't last because they were cute ideas or because the Chinese wanted to confuse us. They lasted because these methods led to people living better, and the very simplest aspect of that is eating. The tidal position in this sequence from solstice to solstice, obviously, is we're just at the 12th month of the Chinese year. If you start at Lapchun, the spring festival, in February the 3rd this year, February the 4th perhaps, that makes January the 12th month, and it includes the solar fortnights of Shao and Dai Hon, which are respectively little and great cold. The rulers of the hexagram, there are 2 rulers. There's always at least 1 ruler, usually the 5th line, so this is unusual. But there are, when you get 2, one of them will be the one that typifies the hexagram, the other one will be one that is the best line. And the first 2 lines are both pretty good. They're slightly flawed. If you cast this hexagram and you get the first line, the change, by changing that first line, changing bottom yang to a yin, you would get Shi, the army, which is about all sorts of unnecessary interference. That's my interpretation. It's about blocking the water with earth. It's the next one along is 8, which is union, which is water over earth, which is spreading the water, the fertility, the life evenly, because that's what water does. Earth doesn't do that, so it's kind of blockages and stoppages. And this is not only the ox month, it's the beginning of an ox year, coming into an ox year, and the ox is known to be about two things. Fertility and blockages are particular things, as well as the ox being particularly sensitive, and there being this aspect of connection with God. And this hexagram underlines that, because it is about a journey from, if you like, of the people towards the prince, of an able human being towards the ruler, towards authority that might recognize his ability. And it is about the prince becoming a better prince and a better human being by ruling well. And it is also about the approach to the light, which is now becoming safe. Technically, there's what's called correspondence between line 1 and line 4, because line 1 is a yang line and line 4 is a yin line, and between line 2, which is yang, and line 5, which is yin, which speaks of a firm connection between the ruler and the people at the bottom of the hexagram, the ruler, the emperor, and his advisor at lines 4 and 5. So there is this connection between a not necessarily very strong, certainly not very dogmatic ruler, dogmatic leader, but someone who is listening very closely to instructions from those whose well-being he is supposed to concern. So if you threw this, that might be to do with your job, it might be to do with the world, it might be to do with certain types of rulers, this being a very critical time in terms of ruling. In the Ganzi cycle, that is the stems and branches, the animals if you like, this is a wood rabbit. Wood rabbit is known for romance and also for resolving conflict, and you'll find the wood rabbit at around 92 degrees east on the Lopan. All of these ideas come from this notion of the Tao, the way, the Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao. So these ideas are a kind of reaching into what we know, or perhaps reaching into a future we can't otherwise see. But it is the Tao it relates to the fact that not everything is logical, not everything is accessible by logical thought. We have the yielding, that's the mother, over the joyful, that's the eldest daughter. The earth borders the lake, earth over the lake. Inclusiveness is one of the meanings here, but also mastering evil by meeting it before it manifests. The strong lines at the bottom, we deal with correction early on. Acknowledging order in order to correct it. Overseeing, and as the minister oversees the work of the people. There may be lots and lots of people and just one minister, but he's overseeing it from somewhere up the top. I mean, in fact, the one way of breaking down the meanings of the lines of all the hexagrams is at the top is the sage, the prophet, the spiritual advisor. At the fifth line is the ruler, the emperor, the person in charge, often also the father, but let's not go too far with those patriarchal ideas. Line 4, the advisor, the minister, if you like. Line 3, sometimes called the duke, because he's being at line 3, he's somewhat away from the ruler, somewhat away from the court, but he speaks of local government, if you like. Again, a very topical issue at the moment. And line 2, the general, the ambassador, these are the representatives of the prince who are far out into the country. And line 1, perhaps the people. Those are not hard and fast, but you get the structure. The rule is at the 5th line, and the spiritual advice is at the 6th. So in advancing the route to greatness, the slope is no longer slippery. Increasingly refined varieties of responsiveness, training, self-improvement, Taoist cultivation, the strong approaches to weaker, and so on. Noblesse oblige. The ideograph is about leadership, knowing when to lead and when to follow, and it is listening without prejudice. The novelist D.H. Lawrence said, "Trust the tale, not the teller. It is what is said that matters, not who said it." Yuan Heng Li Chun, the invocation precedes a journey. The 8th month, Misfortune, could be 8 months from now. So the 8th month would be August, which would be the monkey. September, the rooster. So maybe, perhaps, everything falls apart then. One translation, the Book of Changes, can be astonishingly apposite. One translation actually uses the word recession, and I'll give you that for what it's worth. If we change the 6th line, we get sun, decrease, which is number 41, which is about the misuse of power. That's one explanation of this 8th misfortune. 41 is about going into business for all the wrong reasons. The first change from 41, the next one, which would make the 8th, is number 4, Meng, difficulty at the beginning, attempting the impossible through naivety. So the implication is the 8th line means we go through bad intentions into making silly mistakes, rookie errors. You might call number 4 the rookie error. The 8th line is also, if you follow this line to the next hexagram, which is Guan, the watchtower, and it would be about a withdrawal from life. So this misfortune perhaps is a withdrawal from life, perhaps it is making silly decisions, perhaps it is entering situations with bad faith. Dun number 33 is the opposite of Lin and represents the 6th month, so it's Lin upside down. Is that strictly accurate? It's heaven over mountain anyway. It's a mixed bag, but all ultimately positive, including unusually the 6th, which suggests progress clear through to enlightenment. If you throw this number 6, the 6th line, your path approaches actualization. So there's no time for delay. It's about seizing the time, and it is now safe to do so. Lines 1 and 2 rule. The hexagram text is to begin a sacrificial offering and so on. The lines individually, line 1, which says all arrive, the divination and good fortune, which is pretty good, is about responding. Your influence is growing and will continue to do so as long as you follow the appropriate path. The true leader is responsive rather than reactive. The line is firm and correct, but not central. You're still on the outskirts and in need of a helping hand from line 4, higher up the chain. This is not a time for gloating, this is a time for cooperating, a joint approach. And the change would be to she, earth over water, which we talked about earlier. Line 2, all arrive, good fortune, without doubt advantageous. Failure is no longer possible. You have this rock bed to fall back on. It's like you've got your what you call it, crampon, is that what it's called? In the rock face, and it's solid. Failure is no longer possible. Rebellion is a positive response because it's safe to ask questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. There's nothing wrong with owning mistakes or owning beliefs or attitudes that are not ones that you would like to put a lot of energy behind, but owning them is probably the best way to move on from them. The easiest option here, because it's the first change, is backsliding, but the line is firm and central, though it's incorrect. It gains flexibility from line 5. Perhaps line 5 is throwing down a lifeline. Certainly there is this aspect of meritocracy, of the prince employing first-class people regardless of background. But backsliding is willful and unnecessary. There is opportunity, a reaching down, a high calling, a joint approach. And this one, if you throw line 2 of hexagram 19, it would change to Fu, earth over thunder, which is the return, which is just a boomerang. It's a bounce back. Trampoline. Line 3 is still uncertain. It has these are sometimes categorized as types of response, and this is a sweet, perhaps even sickly response. It's about gaining independence, and the only danger of sabotage is from yourself in line 3. If you throw line 3, avoid complacency, but forgive yourself. Know the difference. You know the uselessness of guilt and of doubling down when you're wrong. There is something comfortable about this, and there's something about being aware of flattery which will delay correction. And the change would be to Tai, which is earth over heaven, hexagram 11, which is a really, really nice hexagram, meaning peace, integration, returning to society, joining. Sometimes called a perfect hexagram, despite 2 incorrect lines, is about tolerance and forgiveness, and as I would say, it's about not milking it. Line 4 is a close response. Leading and guiding lines 1 and 2 obviously. Your step is true, you're already in power. The ladder has been lowered, you can climb up it. It's about meritocracy. The true leader judges and summons on merit alone, a complete approach. And the change would be to Gui Mei, thunder over lake, hexagram 54, marrying maiden, which are about the rules of the patriarchy. As Peter Firebrace, who I learnt the Book of Changes with him 20 years ago or so, he would say the marriage of the youngest daughter not based on correct motives. And this is a critique of patriarchal hierarchy, if you like. So there's something about advancing by sharing power and by being more flexible than formal rules. Are the rules to be obeyed or rebelled against? There's that aspect of constructive rebellion throughout Lin. Line 5 is a wise response from a great prince to the people at line 2. His power is from and of the people. So it's a wise approach. And 90% of management, as they say, is recruitment. Steve Jobs said, we don't hire smart people in order to tell them what to do. We hire smart people for them to tell us what to do. A gentle ruler served by firm advisors. Those are the ones out. They know what's going on. They're out in country. It's a good combination both ways round. So a firm advisor with a gentle ruler is sound. A firm ruler with a gentle advisor is sound. This is yin and yang, the middle path. And Peter Firebrace says beautifully, the innate understanding of the heart. The innate understanding of the heart. And the change would be to GA, which is water over the lake, hexagram 60, which is about restriction, being enveloped, being anonymous, being lost in the crowd, knowing when to stop, moderation. So if you were to cast that line, it is about that being what is so, or what is coming, or what is to take note of. Line 6 is categorized as a sincere response, the previous one being a wise one. No hidden agenda, inward and upward, connected to heaven. Tian Ti Ren, this is this idea of there being 3 realms, heaven, earth and human. Some people would say there are infinitely more, but the point is there's not just one. We are both here in a physical world. There we are, bang the desk, it's real, that actually makes a noise, and yet we're somewhere else, which is beyond reason, beyond logic and beyond causality perhaps. The job is to invite the yin, which is about opening. The road goes ever on. So this is a big-hearted approach. It's about generosity. It's about the spiritual ruler in the temporal realm. It's about intimacy, which comes from a root meaning not being frightened. It's about opening up and owning up and becoming more powerful as a result of it. I think it said in Desperate Housewives that the extent of a man's insanity is the extent of his secrecy. The spiritual ruler in the temporal realm, does it work? Well, there is a Muslim idea that for an individual to be involved in politics is actually a kind of impious act. But this is the grandfather's position. This is the advisor. This is the one who is looking down from above, but is also engaged, which is unusual in the Book of Changes for line 6 to do that. It changes to Sun, mountain over lake, hexagram 41, which is a very poor hexagram. We talked about it earlier, touched on it earlier. It's like playing snakes and ladders and falling down a snake. It is venal temptation. Mountain crumbles into lake, jettisoning the unnecessary. So that is what I have to say about Lin, hexagram 19, approaching. Next month we'll be looking at Tai, earth over heaven, hexagram 11, which is about peace and joining, and again the next stage in the approach to light, when the light and the dark are becoming equal with 3 yin lines over 3 yang lines. And I will look forward to meeting up with you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.